Welcome to the James Rice Show, a humorous, entertaining, and sometimes thought-provoking look at teaching and studying abroad. Join the conversation as James guides you through his experiences and provides insights into how to improve your English and how to improve your teaching of English. And now, here's the man you've been waiting for, James Rice.
Hi, my name is Rick Singer, and I'm the founder of The Key.
That was the mastermind behind the college admission scandal, and we will have him here in his own words. Plus, Aaron Green, founder and college planning advisor of College Liftoff, will give us his take on the worst education scandal in the history of the United States. All coming up on The James Rice Show.
For the past 25 years, our coaches have been helping students discover their life passion and guiding them and their families through the complex college admissions maze. My Key method unlocks the full potential of your son or daughter and sets them on a course to excel in life.
That is William Rick Singer, the mastermind, the architect, the brains behind the biggest education scandal ever seen in the USA. And we are going to walk you through it a little bit about what has happened. And we're going to hear more from Rick Singer and how he would sell parents his system of getting their kids into the top universities. And then we're going to have a very special guest, a college planning advisor, Aaron Green from College Liftoff. And he also has his own podcast called Affording College, and he has helped hundreds of kids legally get into great colleges that they can actually afford. And he's going to give us his take on the scandal and what should happen to the kids enrolled and discuss what universities should be doing better, because these schools with the elites of the elites are really letting the story get out of control. And we have not heard from them at all, except from USC, but nothing from Stanford, who is now being sued by students who did not get into Stanford, and nothing from Georgetown, University of Texas, all silent. So Aaron is going to give us his take on that. Plus, if you haven't heard our interview with Pamela Donnelly, please listen to that interview too. She wrote a book called SWAT Team Tactics for Getting Your Teen into College, and she's been featured in Time Magazine, CNN, New York Times, and we talked with her last week when the scandal was just unfolding, and she has some amazing insights into this whole mess as well. Get this show started. Wow, it's going to be a big show, and I hope we have a lot of great information for you. Now, I want to start by reading to you a quote from a Beverly Hills parent who has been charged in this scandal. The parent was speaking with the head bad guy, our mastermind, Rick Singer, and this conversation was captured by the FBI on a wiretap. All right, that wiretap means they're listening to your conversations when you're speaking on the telephone. And she said, "I need you to get him into USC," him being her son. "I need you to get him into USC. And then I need you to cure cancer and make peace in the Middle East." And Rick Singer replied, "I can do that." Wow. Who is Rick Singer? Well, he's the founder and CEO of a company called Key. And it's according to his website, it's a private life coaching and college counseling company. All right. So, and the Key caters to wealthy families. All right. So you got to have money to meet with Rick, and he only does it through referrals. Now, what does referral mean for our international students listening? Well, that means you have to know someone who knows Rick Singer to get to meet him. All right, you can't just call him up and make an appointment at his office. You got to know someone who knows him to meet him. Kind of like in the mafia or the Yakuza for our Japanese listeners. You got to know somebody to get on the inside. Now, according to what was presented in the court, Singer ran two organizations. One was for profit, and it was called The Key. And some of the audio that you're listening to is from his YouTube channel. Yeah, he's got a YouTube channel. Also, this is crazy. He, according to TMZ is kind of like a gossip website, gossip TV show, but they do find stuff. It's quite interesting. I guess they pay for it. But he was also trying to create a reality TV show about himself and about parents who are trying to get their kids into college. So there's footage out there of him trying to sell this reality TV show. But his day job, I guess, would be The Key, which provided college counseling and test prep services. So he'd help you pass or get a higher score on your SATs or whatever test, ACTs, whatever test you needed. Now, he also ran a kind of charity. And this is where you get into kind of that sticky legal problem or mess that he is in. This charity, according to Singer's website, this is from his own website, was set up to give encouragement and opportunity to disadvantaged students around the world. Yeah, not really, Rick. You were not helping any disadvantaged students. You were helping the rich. Now, the Department of Justice claims that Singer used this charity so rich parents could make donations, and then he would, and the thing that gets me is those donations are tax deductible. Hello. So they're getting tax money back. Brilliant, but terrible. So the parents would make donations, and then he would take those donations and give the money to test administrators and coaches. That's what he was doing all through the charity. And it was so successful that he started it in 2011, and up until now, I guess, he paid out he was paid $25 million. Wow. And he was paying out, if you change the SAT score for, someone's kid, he'd give you $10,000 for that. Just $10,000. I'm thinking, Rick, you could have paid more to your guys. And, of course, a lot of celebrities and high-profile business professionals used his service. Aunt Becky from Full House, yeah, she's taken the hardest hit in the media right now. And I know Stephanie, our producer, she's quite upset because she is a big Full House fan. But Singer, he pled guilty last week. He said, and I quote, this is from Singer's words, "I am responsible and I put all the people in place." Now, usually to get into college in the USA, you have to do four things. You have to have good grades, obviously, number one. You need to get a good SAT or ACT score. These are standardized tests. You need to write an essay about yourself or about something related to perhaps the program you're entering. And then you also need to get letters of recommendation. So generally, that is what is needed to enter into a university. But Singer had another interesting idea about how to get into the top universities, and he called it personal branding. Take a listen.
So getting in has to do with getting involved in your brand. When I was back east this past year, I was on an Ivy League campus, and I saw all these signs for this group called the Inconvenient Youth. And I started to smile because I knew exactly who started that organization and who's actually on campus making a difference. That young lady was totally engaged in the environment. She loved the environment and wanted to do something really special. So she believed in global warming. So I had her 6 years ago as a student. And because she was involved in global warming, we wanted to create an organization that would focus on global warming for youth and get youth educated about global warming. So of course the movie came out, The Inconvenient Truth. So we led with that movie, and Al Gore was frankly very, very helpful in allowing us to use this slideshow. And what she did was she created a youth movement around global warming. She got totally engaged in her brand, in her story, in her passion by creating a youth movement around global warming. Now that she's at college, that brand is continued, and the university loves the fact that this young lady has a larger youth organization that is now spread to all the Ivies all around and based around global warming.
So, my students and my fellow educators, that was Rick Singer's philosophy. And certainly, if you look at Aunt Becky's daughter, Lori Loughlin's daughter, Olivia Jade, she certainly had a brand. And her brand, she was an Instagram influencer, fashion, modeling, all of that stuff going on Instagram, where she had a huge YouTube following as well, where she was making vlogs, and she was branding herself, and from that she was able to get a scholarship on the rowing team. Obviously, right? You know, you just have to go online, check out the Instagram of one of these kids, and you can see that she's not a rower. She's not athletic in any way. She is a model, and she wants to be an actress, and she was very open about it. I mean, it's all over her Instagram account and all over her social media. So where were the admission officers? What were they doing? And are they too busy to do that type of checking? And is it possible for us to give more information to admission officers? Can it be done digitally? All right. Is there a technological solution? I am a big fan of digital portfolios. If students want to go to some of these top universities, wouldn't it make sense to get together a digital portfolio, have them upload videos or some of their social media content or something like that, perhaps even interviewing students that you're giving scholarships away to? I mean, this young lady was given a scholarship for, I don't know how many years, but easily $50,000, $60,000, $70,000, and nobody interviewed her, just the rowing coach or maybe the athletic department. Anyways, all very fixable, I think. And what we're going to do next is we're going to talk with Aaron Green, who is a college planning advisor himself, and we're going to discuss his thoughts on the scandal and what universities should be doing to better represent themselves and what should happen to the kids that cheated their way on to campus. All coming up next after this short message.
Hi, James Rice students. It's me, Cara Mund, Miss America 2018. Now, learning a second language is never easy. It can be difficult and it's sometimes frustrating, but I want you to keep listening to Teacher James and keep working hard. Never give up.
The Study It textbooks are the first ever completely digital and interactive English as a second language textbook series. Once downloaded, these textbooks do not require a Wi-Fi connection. Students and teachers can use them anywhere, anytime. Used in over 40 schools, universities, and NGOs worldwide. Study It is the future of English teaching. Visit www.studyitbooks.com for more information.
Welcome back to the James Rice Show. I'm happy to welcome Aaron Green, founder and college planning advisor at College Liftoff, and the host of the podcast, Affording College. Welcome, Aaron.
Hey, thank you, James. I appreciate it.
Now, tell me a little bit about, before we get into our discussion, tell me a little bit about College Liftoff and your podcast.
Sure, absolutely. So College Liftoff to start. I started the company about, actually going on 10 years ago in September. What we do is we work with families and students on preparing for higher education, academically and financially. To us, it's about calling out colleges what it is today. it's buying a house, really is what it is. You're literally buying a house. You're basically spending $80 to $200,000 on an asset buy. So when in any other thought process or any other time we're doing something like that, do we not consult professionals? Here we have higher education. So we work with our families on how to prepare for it and plan for it academically and financially. How do we work with them? Well, it really starts with good, solid career development work with our high school kids, which honestly is the real crux of what we do. Honestly, 60 to 70% of our time is spent career developing and working through those pieces with high school students from 15, 16, 17 on to help really figure out what it is they truly want to do or go into. Because then we can find the schools that academically do that best. And we can measure best. And that's the important part of this, is really figuring out what does best actually mean, because we have plenty of people that walk up and say, oh, I heard this school was good at that, and this program is good over here. By what measurable? And it's one of those things where we hear those statements a lot. Our position is, what does that mean, and how can you measure that? Well, we measure it very plainly by looking at average starting salaries coming out of programs, job placement numbers, and how do those numbers and those starting salaries compare against other universities. And so that way we can literally see, this school is good at this because their numbers dictate so. Their grad school placements are great. We can see that 98% of their kids are getting jobs with these average starting salaries. That's how we measure good. And that actually is a way of equalizing the playing field across the board between universities to make sure that you can really study them and see what you're getting out of it. So
now,
it really takes that turn.
One of the things that I noticed on your website is you have a debt calculator.
Well, we do have, yes, because we do work with students on figuring out how to work through debt. I mean, we live in a day and age where, they're asking universities, are you asking for a parent's annual salary to go to school? We live in a day and age where it's darn near impossible not to take on student loan debt. But the thing is, you can absolutely control it. And that's what gets into the financial side of this whole thing. It's about creating value based on that side of it. We actually have a very strict formula for our cost structure for how we deal with universities and how much you should be paying for college. Our formula states you should be taking on no more than half of your anticipated annual salary in debt based off of the future career path that you choose. So really, what that's saying is, I've got to work through the career development stuff in order to figure out how much college I can buy with this. Because if I'm a teacher walking out making $30,000 a year, I shouldn't be taking on the same amount of cost and debt as an engineer walking out making 60. I won't be a teacher for very long.
Right.
And that's what we're seeing out there. So that's where we've got to make an adjustment and say we should be buying education based off of the value of the degree, not off of what the sticker price is, and definitely not off of what the university says that it should be charging you up front.
And do you find yourself in your capacity kind of walking parents back off that edge of debt?
Yes, on both sides. Yes, we do walk them back on that one. And really, it's very tough today because the costs are so astronomical, to the point where we see a lot of families, parents, students alike, where this isn't very real. There's such high numbers that it becomes literally an unrealistic thing. So people kind of shut their eyes to what they think of as far as costs are concerned. But we don't do that anywhere else. If I told you were going to spend $70,000 on a car for your kid, you'd probably freak out, never have a reason to. But when we say that for higher education, it doesn't register in the same way. So what we have to do is really reprogram our families to think these are real costs, because they are. Especially if you take on debt, and that type of debt, especially if it's federal debt, it's unforgivable. You won't get rid of it in bankruptcy, so it'll follow you for the rest of your life. So we really do have to help people rethink of how they think about debt and how they think about college costs.
Yeah, no doubt. Absolutely. And I think when you get to that elite level of wealth that we're seeing with the college admission scandal, I mean, they can afford to take it to that next level, which becomes a little dangerous. I mean, you're walking over that cliff as a parent, So what was your reaction to the scandal?
So obviously we've been getting a lot of questions because we do college planning, and people are asking me, Mercy, how can people really have cheated the system this much? Well, there's two things with that. One, the system is ripe for that, in the sense of there are places that haven't been cleaned up, such as the whole aspect of it's easier to get into schools if you're an athlete. eventually somebody was going to take advantage of that, and it looks like they did. Now, this even goes as far as like bribing therapists in order to help get classifications for learning differences, to get extended time on the SAT. These things are things that we've treated very much on the honor system to this point for good reason, because students really need help in these areas. And there are reasons for these things that why they exist in this way. It's just sad that we had to have literally a fraud level situation for somebody, this college person, this, I believe, William Singer, I believe is his name, and a lot of wealthy people to basically say, you know what, we'll pay this guy to cheat the system and he knows how to do it. This guy is no different than a Bernie Madoff. He's just basically defrauding a whole system that we had built for good reason to help students in situations like with learning differences, or trying to get in with a sport, or anything else that are really trying to help students get to the next level.
Yeah, and speaking about the athletics, because I was just reading online, like the Stanford sailing coach, and what do you think about this? The Stanford sailing coach, he was paid, the money to get the child onto the sailing team, and of course he wasn't a sailor, but he took that money and he put it back into the school. I mean, I think it was a significant amount of money, but he put it back into the school and into his sailing program. He didn't necessarily keep it for himself. And I wonder, what do you think? What do you think about that? Because my reaction to that was, when I read it, was, well, I mean, that makes the school culpable in some respect, but in another respect, why is the school not asking, where are you getting this money from, and who is this kid? I'd love to meet him. You know what I mean?
Yeah. If that story is true, I agree with you on both of those fronts. Somebody's got to ask where X amount of hundreds of thousands of dollars have just shown up, and why this person is directly putting it back into their program. See, the problem is for Stanford in that regard is that it implicates them. You're right. It makes them culpable for this. At least if the coach pockets it, it's an independent act, and he does it all on his own. But mercy, now Stanford is dragged into this. Whether or not they knew it or not, or anything like that, I'm not sure of in any of those particular cases. But at the same time, you've got to know what's happening under your roof. You really do. I mean, you're the organization here. If you see gigantic lumps of money coming from coaches being put back into the program, usually it's the reverse of that. Usually it's coaches getting paid to do the job of coaching and pulling money out so they can go spend it on better equipment or anything like that. So if you're seeing a reverse of that, that's a big problem.
Yeah. Now, our parents, I mean, what we're seeing in the media, I mean, we're seeing parents that are, absolutely crazy about getting their kids into the best schools. I mean, is this happening, or is this just a slice of kind of unrealistic? For us, it's we're Schadenfreude, and we're watching and enjoying their downfall in some respects, I guess, in terms of what the media is saying about them. But I mean, are parents that crazy?
Well, that's a great question. A great question, James. And here's the answer to this. Anytime something like this becomes a media sensation, and you're right, this happened to the elite of the elite, in the sense of these are really wealthy people that are cheating the system, that got completely called out on it, and everybody can look and point, and they are right because they absolutely did. And
there's a lot of self-righteous people out there. Yeah.
Well,
no one's ever tried to cheat to get their kid into something better, right?
But the other side of that is that, in my opinion, this is a time that as a country of parents in this age, we've got to look in the mirror and say, like, okay, what am I buying? Or let me rephrase this. What am I doing as far as college planning is concerned for my kid, and how am I approaching this? Am I approaching it with the right perspective, which is helping my kid figure out what it is they want to do, finding the schools that academically do that best, not just brand name, and helping them get to the next level and really work hard at that? Or am I just trying to buy the best school on paper, the best brand name on paper, and put my school into a situation, or put my kid into a situation where they are basically going to be entitled for the next couple of years because they just got into a great school? And that's where we've got to really change the conversation about college in this country, because it's no longer about the brand name of this. I mean, Chucks, if we chose everything like the way that we're coming at this whole thing with college and brand name, then we would think McDonald's is the best cuisine on earth because they're everywhere and we see all of them advertised all the time. We know that's not the case. We've got to look at this from the perspective of what school is actually good at what it is my student wants to do, and back that up, figure out what it is my kid wants to do first. I'll give you a great example of this and how you can really determine what good really means and how we should be rethinking about this. We can take a program like supply chain management, which is an offshoot of operations and logistics in business schools. It's a relatively modern business discipline, a little bit more technical by creation. The second best school in the country at this is Harvard. And Harvard's a great school, has a 6% acceptance rate. It's extremely expensive. Unless there's a money situation, you can play with that. Guess where the best school is in the country at this?
That's a great question. I don't know. Where?
Michigan State.
Oh.
Michigan State's the best school in the country in this. And here's the thing about Michigan State. They have roughly a 70% acceptance rate. It's roughly $45,000 a year out of state. We see average discounts for out-of-state students, roughly $15,000 off of the tuition for that. So we know we can get the best education in that field where I can get a 3.4 to 3.7 kid to be able to go to without breaking a sweat at roughly $30,000 a year. That's value. That's how I can look at this and say, okay, I know I can figure out how to see what's best in this respective area. And it's not exactly brand name. It's about figuring out what industry is looking for and how they're dictating what good is. So that's the thing we've got to change in this country, and the thing that we've got to look at ourselves in the mirror about this whole scandal. How are we approaching this whole college conversation? And am I just trying to chase down what I perceive of as good because I've just heard about it through neighbors, on TV, prestige, what I deem because of just what I've heard? And we've got to re-educate ourselves on literally higher education.
Let's do a nice segue into branding, because this gentleman, Rick Singer, who was, the mastermind behind all of this, he built a business around helping kids get into colleges. And of course, he'd done the illegal things, but he'd also done a lot of legal things. And part of his philosophy was about building personal branding. And that was something that he promoted to students, that you need to build your personal brand in order to get into colleges and universities. So how important is personal branding? Because obviously a lot of people bought into this philosophy.
That's a great question. And I'll be honest with you, I don't really agree with it. And I've done college planning for now 10 years. At least my company's been around for that, and we've grown nicely. It's not about building a brand for a kid and trying to create some Instagram perception of who they are. It's about just the student doing their best. I'll tell you, we've had 700 families we've worked with at this point. We've had 7 cases out of those 700 that this went awry, and it wasn't good. And it was because those families were asking us to do something which we're not comfortable ever doing, which is help me get my kid into this school. And why that's a problem is because that kid isn't really built for that school. Trying to get a 3.4, or let me rephrase this, trying to trick a university, whether it be USC, UCLA, Stanford, Carnegie, any of them, to admit a 3.4 is not going to happen, and it's completely unethical. It's about finding the right school for the right kid. And I think that's the difference here. There are things you can do with the student in order to help them fine-tune what they need to be doing for admissions. They're very simple things, honestly. It's just making sure you have a good, solid resume, making sure you're doing your best as far as school is concerned, doing your best on ACT and SAT scores, and I mean literally doing your best. I'm not talking about being doctored or anything like that, but doing your best as a student. That's what you want to be doing. There's nothing that I or anybody else should be doing other than looking at who that student is and seeing where their best is and finding the best option for them. Creating some brand around a student in order to try to push them into a situation that they're not built for, or haven't been put into the right situation is the best way of putting it. I hesitate to say earned into the right situation, because every student is, if they're doing their best, they've earned great things. That's not the way you want to approach this at all. You really want to find what's best for that student, and that's where you want to begin. Now, you can do things such as, if I have a medical-based student, I know they're probably going to go down the medical route. It's probably best to go do some job shadowing and or some volunteering at local hospitals. That's probably a good thing to do. That's more fine-tuning what you need to do in order to be prepared for the next level, because that's the road you're taking down. If I have an engineer, going and shadowing an engineer in a respective field, whether it be civil, mechanical, industrial systems, taking a look at that, and that way you can get a feel for it, the industry as a student, but also that is something nice to put on your resume that shows you are more committed to it. Those are the things you want to be doing.
Now, a lot of the scandal focused on SAT scores and people taking SATs for the kids or changing the answers from being incorrect to correct. How serious a problem do we have with SATs? Because I know, in other countries where they're taking SATs, sometimes they have to shut it down because of the fear of cheating. I mean, what is going wrong with SATs, and do we need SATs in the future?
It's a good question. And in this country, we're in the Midwest, and so we actually function typically a little bit more in the ACT, but it's a very standard setup as the SAT.
Right,
Both
ACT
equivalent.
or SAT, yes.
Yeah. So the standardized tests, there are pluses and minuses to it on both sides. The pluses are is that you do create a standard measuring stick across the board of seeing particular aptitude in different fields, which helps to be able to decipher between universities, between high schools, between students and situations and things like that. It really just shows what your ability is, what you're capable of, if not even just where you sit right now. There is a help with that, of being able to kind of have a central measuring stick that's pretty universal. That's always nice. The bad side about it is that depending on the situation for the student, that may not actually be equal. That may not actually be an equal situation, because if you have certain students that aren't great test takers but are great students, you'll have situations where that doesn't really show what that student's potential is. I'll give you a great example. I have a mechanical engineering degree, and I specialized in jet engine mechanics in college, and my best score on the ACT was a 19. But that didn't stop me from finishing my degree at Ohio State, and I averaged a 3.9 GPA while I was in high school, and above, right around a 3, if not a little above, in college, and I still finished my degree. So using it as the only measuring stick is the problem. Now, whether or not we should ban it because of cheating scandals and things like that, truth be told, no, because this is one incident that's happened, and it's probably been, let's say he's worked with 50 to 100 to 800 kids. That test is taken by millions every year, and this is the first we're seeing any real light of something like this happening. Now, if this continues to be a problem, if this continues to be something we're seeing more traces of, then we do have to rethink it, especially even overseas where it's not being done, if it can't be proctored properly across the board. So far from my seat, and I have a very small seat in this, I've really seen it being not as much of a problem overall. There's some places that ACT and SAT themselves as entities need to clean up and make sure that they're done more thoughtfully and more routinely, to say the least. But until otherwise, I think we're okay with it being still a decent measuring stick.
Do you
but
know
only a part
how
of the
they?
measure.
Sorry, go ahead.
No.
I was just going to say, do you know how they mark the SATs? Because when they're doing standardized tests, for example, with IELTS, which is an English test to check their English level, I mean, they have about 4 different people marking each person's test. They've broken it down into different sections. So it's really hard to kind of manipulate that test, because you'd have to manipulate 4 people, basically. Do you know how the SATs are marked?
Truth be told, James, I really don't know how their grading system works. I know a good amount of it's done by obviously it's done by Scantron. I'm really not sure how they do the evaluation on it. I'm sorry, I really couldn't answer that one too honestly for you.
In the U.S. and overseas, they're test centers, right? So they're officially sanctioned centers.
Yes, yeah. So I do know that part. That they set up testing dates and specific areas where that's done, and it's being proctored by somebody that works for SAT or is hired by ACT or SAT to monitor the test. In a very standard setup, you usually have 20 or 30 students at a time in a classroom on a Saturday for 2.5 hours, 3 hours, whatever the number may be, in order to monitor that test. The only outside situations with that are when students do need extra time because of learning differences. And so those are set up on a really case-by-case basis. And that's one of the really disheartening things about this whole thing, and how this whole situation wasn't just unethical, but disgustingly sad, because there are students that really do need that help, a lot of them. And it takes real work for a family and a student to be able to get extra time on the SAT or ACT if they do need that help. And that's a real sad thing that was taken advantage of in this.
Yeah, I mean, that's quite disgusting. What do you think should happen to the kids that are caught up in this?
Well, it sounds like
your feelings.
Yeah, it sounds like a few of them have already left school. It's tough because every day we're working with students and parents, and 99% of our families are in great positions, and they have great attitudes and great perspectives about the fact that this is a student-led process. In fact, we always say this is a student-led process, but a family decision. So we try to put our kids in the driver's seats about making decisions, but knowing that everybody's affected, whether it be the academics, but mostly the finances of this. So we want to be making good decisions across the board, and the whole family has to buy off on that. In this case, and like the 7 cases that we dealt with, we had situations where parents were trying to force feed their students into situations that weren't necessarily the best thing for them from an educational standpoint. Now, the question, of course, is how much is a student aware of that? That's a tough place to be, because even if the student is aware, if you have kids, you know how it is or we've all been kids with our parents as teenagers. It's very tough for me to sit back and say, I need to go against what my parents are doing right at this moment because it's completely unethical. Because the truth is, you still go home with them, you still eat dinner under their roof and all these other things. To be able to call them out in the moment to say all this, that's a very tough place to be. Now,
it's going to be a tough one. I mean, it's going to be hard for schools to decide what to do. I mean, obviously, some of the higher profile ones have already taken steps, but what should happen to them?
My thought on this one is, if I were the university, I would tell the students that, you know what, we probably need to separate right now. If not expel you from this university, but let's call it a hiatus. Almost say that we're going to finish out the year as a gap semester or whatnot, and let's have you reevaluate your whole college situation where we sit right now. Maybe that means reapplying to this school to come back in the fall as a transfer student. Maybe that means going through the whole application process for other schools as a transfer student. Let's just take a step back and not put you in a position where you're just thrown out and everything is completely unwound for you. Let's let you figure this out without any introduction or any parent interaction in this, and see where you stand.
Right.
Let's have you reapply to USC. See what you do. You've taken some classes here. Let's see what your high school transcripts really look like. Let's reevaluate you as a student and see if you really should be here or not. Those are the things I think that the university should do, or have them reapply to other schools that are probably down their alley. But I think that this is a time for those students to take a step back themselves and reevaluate their own college decisions and figure out what their next steps really should be.
What do you think about the Stanford lawsuit? Not sure if you've heard about it, because it's just some breaking news, I guess, in that the students are feeling that their degree has been devalued, so they're trying to set up a class action lawsuit. Do you have any reaction?
Yeah, I do, and I'm seeing this also from a parent perspective. I think there's a class action lawsuit being brought together by a group of parents of students who didn't get into these schools. Yeah, that's a tough place for a school to be, but you've got to know what's happening under your roof. You really do. You're talking about universities with multi-billion-dollar endowment structures, footholds in every place, and you want to hold up a certain particular type of attitude or pedigree as far as it being a university at the level of what Stanford and USC, UCLA, any of these universities, the big name schools. This where you wanted to be, high profile, exclusive, multi-billion-dollar endowment funds. You got to figure it out.
Yeah, and
You had situations of people cheating under your roof. This is you're gonna have to figure that out. It's a tough place for you to be, but you're gonna have to deal with it. They've got a good reason to do that.
I look at
students.
Admission departments, and I am concerned, even here in Canada where we're located, I am concerned about how they're choosing their students. And I often discuss the fact that we have a student, I know a student that he's brilliant in math, really wonderful. He's got great grades. And he's applying to all of the top schools, and they're all fighting over him, even overseas schools fighting over him. But if you had met the boy, I don't know that they would be fighting over him. He's not the type of boy you want at your school. And, I wonder if there is a way to fix those admission departments. And I think about digital portfolios. I mean, I know it's hard to interview each student. That's not going to be realistic. But we're a digital, 21st century culture now, and the kids are certainly familiar with digital tools. Can't they put together a digital portfolio that shows who they are, shows what they've been doing, maybe has an interview that the admission people could watch and learn about? What do you think?
Well, I think that there are a couple of things that the universities on their side could do. That's one side of it. I think there's a technological side that can make that a lot easier. When we're going through admissions process with our students, there are a lot of standard things that have to be submitted for a student. There's the application itself. There's typically an essay or multiple essays to kind of go through that. You have to submit your transcripts, your SAT and ACT scores, and depending on the program you're going into, sometimes there's a portfolio, but always letters of recommendations along the way. The problem inevitably is, though, that major universities are getting tens, if not hundreds of thousands of applications. Again, the problem is the brand name. That's what we're chasing. There is a way on the student side to be able to do this better. One, it's about finding the schools that are right down your wheelhouse, and not just saying like, okay, I'm going to apply to all the top schools in the top 10 or top 50. What are the schools that are going to be academically superior in my area? And then go do thorough college visits. And there's been a term that's been tossed around for years. It's called dedicated interest. It's showing the university that you actually are truly interested in that school. And it actually goes through just having a good thorough college visit and doing a bit of networking, going and talking to somebody specifically in the program you're planning on going into, taking some business cards, shaking hands, emailing those advisors back and saying thank you for the visit. And that way this school really knows you're serious, and vice versa. And that's how you can do it from the student side, to just get a real, actual, on the level edge up with the university, which is just go there and have a good visit. And that way, when they look at your profile, they'll have more of an understanding of who you are. But that takes a little bit of work on the family and the student side to just make sure you're doing those things when you're visiting schools, to make sure that they know who you are before you leave. So it would be nice to be able to have the setups for universities to be able to have an online portfolio for each student and be able to kind of interview them over Skype, just even for 10 minutes. But that may not even tell the whole story. It's really about who's taking the initiative to make sure that this university knows who they are and knows what they bring to the table. Just like we do in job interviews. You may have hundreds of candidates for a particular job. The one that stands out to you the most is going to be the one that gets the job, though. And it's usually not the one you're just flipping through papers for. It's the one that takes the next step in order to do it.
Now, what are you looking for in the coming days and weeks from this scandal?
I think there's still going to just be a lot of fallout. And I think what's going to really happen is that, just like with this lawsuit by the students, lawsuit by the parents, people are just going to really start seeing the light on, we really don't know what's happening with admissions. We really don't know why we're choosing these schools. We really don't know why we're just throwing money at this without making any real solid decisions. At least part of that I hope they're coming to with this one. But I think it is really bringing to light a little bit in all of us to understand that maybe we don't know as much about how to approach this whole college thing, college conversations, how to choose it, how to go through it, than we actually do. And the folks that are involved in the scandal, truth be told, I'm a big proponent of, if this is if this is what you sowed, well, this is what you're going to have to reap with that. If you decided to cheat the system in this way, even if it isn't technically illegal, but you knew it was unethical, and I'll tell you, the only reason it's not illegal is because it really hasn't been done before. But if you happen to know it's unethical, which is a whole different story, you can kind of figure that out, then you might be in a little bit of it. So I think they're going to all have some real heavy things to work their way out of. Again, some of the kids have already left school. I don't know what you do if you've already been publicly put out there. How do you return back to college? How do you get, I think one of Lori Loughlin's daughters has lost major sponsors for whatever she was doing on Instagram and things like that. I don't know how you regain that type of trust. I think it's going to take some time to just sit back and kind of rebuild their whole life and philosophy on the grounds of being, on the level.
Yeah, and apparently there may be more.
Yeah, I think there will be a lot more.
Yeah, that would be shocking.
I think it's best for the universities to put this on the table right now and figure out if they were involved in this and weed it out as quickly as they possibly can. Because if you're going to be, from a university standpoint, if you're going to be attached in this scandal, you're going to be really targeted, because there are a lot of students that didn't get into these schools that had spots taken up by these kids that did do all this cheating. You're going to want to get that out really quickly.
Are you surprised that the universities have not really gotten out in front of this? I mean, only USC that I'm aware of has kind of put out a statement that they're going to look at it case by case. But are you surprised that the universities are not really, having press conferences and saying, this is a terrible thing and we're investigating? I mean, maybe I haven't seen it, but I'm not hearing anything from the universities.
Yeah, truth be told, I'm not surprised by it.
Okay.
Now, should they be doing it? That's a whole different story. They absolutely should be doing it. I'm not surprised by it, because this is the thing about colleges and universities. They're not used to this. This is not the area that they exist in. This whole public limelight and being called out literally in the world of instant stuff and social media, and having to respond with press conferences and press statements and responses back in that way. Not the way that we, businesses naturally have to do if something happens, or administrations or anything like that. But again, this is a situation they've kind of created on their own. Whether or not they want to own up to it, universities as a situation. I tell this to every family that walks through our door. Name something else where we're spending, again, this type of money on, and we're not consulting professionals, but also if they're walking up asking you for up to $60,000 a year to spend on this, you better believe they mean business, and we got to make sure to mean it back. So if you're doing that, if you're going to be up there as a university asking for the type of money they want to admit a kid and educate them for the next 4 years, you better be willing to answer questions when problems like this arise.
Yeah, it's fascinating stuff.
But it is fascinating stuff. And they're in a world that, truth be told, they created. When they decided to start charging you $40,000, $50,000, $60,000 a year, you're in a playing field that is not the same. You think you're about education at that point. There's a whole different thing at play when that happens, when you're asking for families to fork over an annual salary. And so when situations like this arise, people are going to be angry and really call you out on it. And truth be told, it doesn't matter if you're ready to respond to it or not. You're going to have to.
Interesting discussion, Aaron. Thank you so much for your perspective. We're going to have to make this into a longer podcast now.
Oh,
that was amazing. Thank you for your time.
Oh, no problem. No problem at all. Thank you for having me.
Have you subscribed to James's newsletter? When you subscribe, you will receive a free Study It ESL textbook. Visit www.thejamesriceshow.com for more information and join today.
So that was a fascinating discussion with Aaron Green, and I thank Aaron for coming on to the show. I know he was going out to an event, so I appreciated that he come on. I mean, I could have talked to him all night. He was very interesting. Now, there is a Canadian angle to this story. So it's not only U.S. parents who went a little crazy to get their kids into the best of schools. A Canadian parent has been charged. His name is David Sidhu, and he is quite famous here in Canada. He was the first Indian football player, like American football player, to play in our Canadian Football League. And he has been charged with bribery or whatever he's been charged with, for paying $100,000 to have someone pretend to be his son and take the SAT scores. And he paid also for both of his sons to do that, paid $100,000 each to get their SAT scores faked. And so he was charged and he was sent to Boston, and he has pled not guilty. So that's interesting. So he's saying, hey, I'm not guilty here. Now, Sidhu even has, he played football in Canada, and he played football at UBC. UBC, University of British Columbia, is a famous university here in Canada. And the football field is actually named after him, the Sidhu Field. So at the stadium, they honored him with that, and he's actually part of the UBC. He graduated from UBC, and he's very active in the UBC school, and he is the president and CEO of East West Petroleum Company, so a very large oil company, and he's actually stepped down. So he has removed himself from that business because of this horrible mess that he's finding himself in. So it's not only U.S. parents that have gone a little bit crazy. Also, Canadian parents have been charged too. So we'll have to see where that leads. So we'll be following this story, and please subscribe to the James Rice Show on podcast, and follow us on Spotify, YouTube. We'll be updating if there is any new breaking news story out there. We'll let you guys know as soon as we can. And thank you guys again for tuning in and supporting us on our little podcast here, and we appreciate it. And I hope that everyone has an amazing week. And remember, be crazy.
Thanks for listening to The James Rice Show. Don't forget to subscribe to our newsletter and send us your questions or comments at www.thejamesriceshow.com.